It's easy to look at outside forces as the blame for the breakdown of order, especially in a disaster. But what if I told you that the biggest threat to our well-being in 2024, it's already active and gaining momentum every day? There are three primary contributing factors that are already gaining steam, and they're getting more difficult to ignore with each passing day. It's behind the fall of every great society, and it might be our undoing one day as well. So let's talk about it. The enemy. You may not have had a name for this, but I guarantee you've seen it in one way or another, perhaps even been swept into it, and experienced or witnessed the ensuing chaos and anarchy. Now, some of the most prominent and well-known think tanks have only begun to label it in the last 50 years or so, and they call it social cohesion. It's a term that encompasses shared values, reducing disparities between people, fostering a sense of belonging among diverse societal members, mitigating conflict, and nurturing societal bonds. Let me just say that I don't expect this video to get a lot of views. For one, it's on a pretty heady kind of theoretical topic, even though it's hands down maybe the biggest threat that you're going to face next year and are probably facing right now. And I'm going to tell you what you should be watching for and doing to keep safe. And finally, I'll also tell you the solution and how you can prepare against it. Now, second, explaining the attacks on social cohesion and the dangers that you should prepare against is really exposing the plan. And I can't imagine the algorithms will like having the curtain pulled back on them. If you think about the bonds that result in what we might call community, social cohesion is the attack on those binding factors. Social cohesion comprises the strong social bonds that are infused with a sense of togetherness that makes a community safe to live in. But it's being attacked on every conceivable front. You've seen these attacks, whether that's social media and news algorithms intentionally feeding you divisive content, foreign troll farms poised to spread misinformation during a hotly contested election, politicians with deliberately chosen words to elicit a wave of passionate anger in their supporters, or just a neighbor out to convince you that you're being cheated. There's an assault on the calm and secure bonds of community everywhere you look. Now, attacking social cohesion, it's kind of like a drug, and many are really addicted to it. Division and fostering an us versus them mentality is used by media corporations and politicians to get clicks. They want you angry and move to action so that you'll vote or buy their solution to their problem that they're claiming. And look, this isn't just an American problem, however. Australia, Europe, across Central Africa, South America, and even China, you can see the deterioration of social cohesion in the form of protests, riots, internment camps, and even revolutions. Now, that being said, the United States will be the world's biggest case study for the erosion of social cohesion next year. Here are the three biggest attackers of social cohesion next year. Download the Start Preparing Survival Guide to help you prepare for any disaster. I'll post a link in the description and comments section below, or visit cityprepping.com/get started for a free guide to help you get started on your journey of preparedness. Number 1. Presidential election. Any study of American politics will reveal periods of complete corruption and even all-out brawls among politicians. Still, we have become so accustomed to relative peace, even some bipartisan cooperation, when things were going relatively well. We're in a new phase where facts and statistics, they don't carry the same weight. The unemployment rate could be at historic lows, and someone will question the statistic even to recast it as a negative or dismiss it altogether. The Chinese government has perhaps taken this to an all-new high by just simply not reporting any more employment data. And no data, no problem, right? As we move into a presidential election year here in the United States, we will see increasing attacks on all information from both sides. And you're not going to know what's true from the most truthful and long-trusted sources because someone will be spinning it to get a rise in a response out of you, to drive you to anger or a feeling of discontent or get you to inevitably vote. Now, foreign adversaries are going to stoke this. And as one of our City Prepping community members said about the coming election, perhaps better than I could, if you're willing to sit anywhere in the intelligence communities of either China or Russia, you basically can't wait. This is a nice slow pitch right down the middle, going to knock it out of the park. You've got your stringer disassociated hacker groups all lined up for this one, a glut of sensational disinformation, and you just dump that glue right in the gears. And it's not just domestically that we have a problem, it's from foreign influences as well. In FBI Director Christopher Wray's recent testimony to Congress, he stated, "I would say that it is unique about the environment that we're in right now in my career is that while there may have been times over the years where individual threats could have been higher here or there, than where they might be right now. I've never seen a time where all the threats, or so many of the threats, are all elevated all at the exact same time. Now, this is shocking when you consider the statement as coming from a man who's nearly 3 decades of government experience, who has seen multiple national crises from 9/11 to the El Paso shootings, and international crisis from terror attacks and invasions. And no matter which side of the political spectrum that you belong to, every foreign and domestic force will be trying to drive a wedge between you and the person on your right or your left. And their attack on the bonds that we share is an attack on that social cohesion. So you may ask, well, why does that matter? The last election and ensuing challenges to the process could easily spill out into the cities and towns across the country. Number 2, culture wars. Let me just pull back for a moment in this part of the video and just get personal with you. If you've watched my channel for any length of time, you know that I will not engage in culture wars on my channel, and that's by design. I grew up in a fairly large church that focused on community, and some of my fondest memories as a child were the potluck dinners after Sunday morning service. It was a time when we ate with other families. I got to experience firsthand the joys and values in having a community of loving individuals around you. And I know the power of unity, compassion, and love. In culture wars, they act in the exact opposite manner. By design, they divide. And depending upon your news source, you're probably being inundated with this type of thinking, and honestly, it can feel good. Honestly, it's difficult for me to spend any amount of time with individuals that fixate on this. I find it draining. So what is culture wars? Culture wars refer to the intense societal conflicts over values, beliefs, and cultural norms, often involving debates on social issues like religion, morality, politics, and identity. The culture wars, usually made up or overly inflated, are also meant to get a reaction out of you. And lately, the term culture wars has even been praised, even though it erodes social cohesion. It creates and encourages an us versus them attitude. In its extreme case, it dehumanizes one subset or group to validate another. It doesn't look for similarities, but stokes disparities. And from the beginning of time, humankind has suffered from a case of the haves and the have-nots. We perceive one group is out to take what we perceive we have. And I use this word perceive twice because we typically don't even possess what we think is being taken from us. What one person calls a social safety net, another decries it as a handout. What one person deems an immigrant fleeing from a war zone, another person perceives a person out to steal their job. When a person sees a video of even a small but violent conflict hundreds of miles away from them, their mind starts to imagine that the incident is systemic across that whole country. I see that a lot, by the way. One video on something that happens in one town becomes a major national talking point for pundits on every news cycle. And it's easy to think that whatever that was, a school fight, a person abusing the government system, or some individual craziness, is everywhere and happening all the time. We get angry and upset about it. We want to solve it and demand our politicians enact policy to protect us. But we have forgotten that it was just one case, far away, and it isn't systemic at all. The fact is that others are knowingly and unknowingly pushing the buttons on this culture war. And like the politicians in the presidential election, they seek to divide you, agitate you, and motivate you to act on their behalf. Now remember, gang, when someone is telling you that the others are out to ruin your life and you find yourself getting emotionally charged, you have just fallen prey to their propaganda. Now I know the comment section is going to light up on me about this comment, but remember, if the underlying emotion that they're trying to get you to feel is rage, anger, or hate towards someone else, then you are the target of their propaganda. Number 3, everywhere and all at once. If there is one systemic thing, it's that the attacks on social cohesion are occurring everywhere and all at once. From doctor's office, waiting rooms, to lines at the grocery store, you're going to hear people starting conversations by pointing out some irritation, taxes, self-checkout lanes, someone else's appearance, kids these days, inflation, or whatever. Now, complaining about a society has become a conversation starter as we seek to find connections with people. And ironically, some people are stoking the divisions to try and find common ground, common animosities with others. And it's an odd result, to say the least. And the holidays are a great time to see this everywhere and all at once concept up close. You may have individuals that are difficult to be around that are just too draining. You may be dreading that one relative or friend already. And this attack on social cohesion is more endemic than that, though. You may dread the next school board meeting, going to work, or even driving to the store and interacting with people. In the formerly neutral places, even workplaces, churches, and schools, where politicians and division were set aside traditionally for the greater good, are now rife with division and acrimony. And you might have noticed this over the last several years, a growing and contentious divide. And that's how it works. Inevitably, you are either driven to action or passively accept the decline. You'll see these divisions stoked in every news report, every bumper sticker, and every innuendo. You'll see it at work, when you're out to eat, or when you're gathering socially. But remember this point. People are either stoking the divisions or searching for the bonds that we have in common. But they can't do both when division is that systemic and endemic, when it's ingrained within the system and widespread. And it might seem like there's nothing that you can do but watch and wait for the inevitable societal collapse, because it sure seems at times that we're heading that way. So, knowing all that, here's how you can actively work on helping build up your community to help with social cohesion. Prepping a solution. First, understand that the enemy of social cohesion attackers is independent thought. When you take a pause and ask yourself a few questions, you ensure that you're not acting out of an impulse and in the way that they want you to. Ask yourself if whatever you are seeing or reading truly impacts you. As I mentioned earlier, is it a video fed to you by an algorithm, but really just one incident, perhaps out of context and involving no one you knew? If you can answer yes to any of those, it might be just that someone is trying to get a reaction out of you and others. Second, look for the community builders. We recently launched the City Prepping Community, and we launched a map feature on the site where people could, if they choose, connect with other like-minded individuals. Now, attacks on social cohesion are one of the great motivators for many to begin prepping, because they realize how fragile our once strong connections with each other really are. And there is an urge to take care of yourself and your family if the rest of society continues its decline. At the same time, it's easy to feel disconnected from people, even those you might ideologically disagree with or have been conditioned to disagree with geographically. And look for the people building something instead of those that are tearing things down. Avoid being a member of groups that would encourage you to dislike or condemn others, but offer no ways to connect people together. Now then, find your community. Whether that's an online prepper group, a club, a church, or social group, an activity group, or whatever, seek drama-free groups that help to connect people together. Community and a sense of community are preps like any other. The attackers of social cohesion are many, and they're always going to be there. They always have been, and probably since people first formed tribes. But survivors of every disaster, survivors of every troubled period of human existence, from wars to natural disasters, have all had one thing in common. And at some point, they ignored the forces that would divide them and gathered the forces around them that would support or build them up. Now look, community is a prep, and it's also the greatest defense against the attackers of social cohesion. Finally, understand that where you are right now, in location and present circumstances, it might mean that you're prepping alone, but that's okay. When you take positive steps in your preps daily and you build up your preps, you take a step towards self-sufficiency. You become less concerned with the divisions in our society and more concerned with your independence. And when it's just you, it's a start. And when a few people in your community actively increase their resilience, self-sufficiency, and survivable ability, you build community immunity to the world's outside chaos. And when many people across your communities are prepped, even large disasters, they become mere blips, not life-altering events. Now, the solution to the erosion of social cohesion is to understand it, look for the community builders, find your community, build your preps, and build your community. And that's more easily said than done, for sure. Look, over this next year, there will be many people searching for a label to define the erosion of social cohesion. There will be many more willing and unknowingly contributing to the deterioration of social cohesion. People you trust will be tearing things down, criticizing, and stoking the fires of division. And as a prepper, you can only ride that stress and cortisol release for so long. And I'm telling you, after a while, it will feel overwhelming and inevitable. You must guard against that and stay focused on your preps this new year. Stay focused on becoming just a hair more self-sufficient and independent of the supply chains and government. And as you build a foundation for your future, look for these community builders along the way. Join with them and turn tomorrow into a more stable day despite the forces that would seek to convince you that it's all falling apart and there's some silver bullet for solving it. So what are your thoughts? What advice would you give others? Feel free to post those in the comments section below, as I would enjoy hearing from you, and I'm sure the community would as well. Look, I know this video is very heady, and it was difficult to put together because as I look across my own country, I see these issues playing out, and I hear it all the time. As I mentioned a few times in the video, I just recently launched a community portal. And the goal of the portal is not to focus on what divides us, but what unites us, our desire to prepare. And it's difficult. I'll be honest with you, living in a day and age where division, cultural wars, I hear it from people all the time. Without sharing too much information, because I don't want to expose anybody, it's been really disappointing is the word I'm looking for. To see when I talk to people that I knew were some of the most loving and kind people that I grew up around, and now watch them fall prey to this talk of division, pitting everybody against them and some us versus them attitude of, well, hey, they disagree. And, I can tell when I listen to people where they get their news from, because they'll start using certain keywords that are very repetitive, and they'll start saying, well, this group is doing this and it's doing that. And I often wonder, where in the world did you hear that? And as I pull back and I begin to look at certain news outlets, I even hate to use the word news, but commentary outlets, I see those same talking points promoted. In those same outlets, they make their money off division. And it's frustrating because some of the kindness and loving people I've met have gotten caught up in this. I say all this because I encourage you all, guard yourself against that. Be better than that. Again, look, I have my own bias and I realize it, and I have to constantly guard against that. The thing I've learned over the years is compassion and love for people. And it's easy to focus on the differences, but I've chosen, and I've made mistakes at times, but I've chosen in my life to follow the model of what was presented to me as a child. I was raised in a church, and I was taught a certain way to be kind to one another. Love your neighbor as yourself. When's the last time you've heard that promoted, that message, honestly? Again, I'd love to have any feedback. Feel free to post it below, and as always, stay safe out there.